The Timberwolves win their fourth straight game, beating the Grizzlies on Saturday, despite a typically lackluster start for the Wolves in a game that they should have won a little bit more easily. We'll break down what happened next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. It is a game day. The Wolves remain in Memphis to play the Grizzlies for the second time in a row tonight. Not a whole lot to preview since we just saw the Grizzlies Saturday. We'll talk a little bit about it toward the end of the show today. We'll talk about the standings, etc. But primarily want to focus on a bit of a mixed bag of a performance for the Timberwolves on Saturday. Overall, I would say it was a professional, balanced win, a double-digit win over a team the Wolves should have beaten by double digits, but there were some lackluster, I'll say lackadaisical moments early in the game. Chris Finch was pretty unhappy based on what the players said at halftime because of the way the first half unfolded. Still, the Wolves were up double figures at halftime for a couple of key reasons, things they did do well in the first half, and then they ultimately put the game away in the fourth quarter, doing some things, some different things well later in the game. So we'll talk about why it was a mixed bag. This kind of conundrum we see the Wolves in often where they don't dominate teams they should dominate, but they ultimately kind of sort of did. They're just like, there was no garbage time. Ant had to play a bunch. Like, it just felt weird. We'll dig into what I mean by that here first on the show today. First, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. All right. So to be clear, coming into this game, the Wolves had won 3 straight. Coming off the emotional, just mostly because of the opponent, but the big win, the second night of a back-to-back, the fourth game in 5 days against the defending champ Thunder on Thursday. Friday off, they traveled to Memphis. And now the Grizzlies are on the second night of a back-to-back, and of course they're missing guys. Obviously, John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. are the primary ones. They did get Ty Jerome back, and he gave the Wolves some fits in this game. We'll talk a little bit about that. In his first game of the season, of course, he was a big part of Cleveland's 60-plus win team last year, and a big acquisition for the Grizzlies this offseason. So he's finally playing for them and did make a difference in this game. The Wolves, I think, on FanDuel were 6.5-point favorites coming in. I actually thought it could have been a little bit of a higher line. This is, a starless Memphis team that the Wolves should dominate. And they did. Like, if you glanced at the score at any point in the first half, you would have been like, all right, like, things are going as they should, right? Minnesota was up by 9 at the end of the first quarter. They were up double figures for a good chunk of the second quarter, up 9 at halftime, and then up 18 going into the fourth quarter. So, and they won by what, 17 points. So at first glance, you're like, okay, they did what they needed to do. But look another layer. Ant had to play 39 minutes after 4 games in 5 nights, and of course the foot issue he's been dealing with. The Timberwolves turned it over 15 times as a team. Not a horrific number. We've seen much worse numbers, but not great. Memphis scored 114 points, shot 49% from the field. Like, that's not a great offensive team. And I guess the more important thing there, because the 3-point line, the Wolves actually defended well. We'll talk about that. But like points in the paint, Memphis scored 64 points in the paint in this game. The Wolves are a minus 24 points in the paint. That's not great. Like, you look at all those things, you're like, wait a minute. How'd they win this game by 17? Well, the way they got off to a quick 9-point lead was 3-point shooting. Plain and simple. Minnesota couldn't miss early in this game from 3. And Memphis, I think, started 1 of 14. And they finished the game 27% from 3. They obviously shot it much better in the second half. It's part of the reason they hung around and really kind of got back into the game at one point, and made things relatively interesting in some of the various early fourth quarter-ish time frame. But the Wolves got out to the lead that they did because they were shooting the ball so well. If they hadn't been making threes, this thing would have been really ugly. The offensive process was bad. There was a lot, way too much isolation early in the game. The way the Wolves shared the ball against OKC on Thursday, it's, of course, exactly how you need to beat the Thunder. They didn't do that early in the game against Memphis. A ton of isolation. Ant, Julius Randle, there was a lot of that. There was I think it was late second quarter debacle when, was the second quarter? Well, there was that, I forget now when it was, but the possession with Rudy Gobert airballed the free throw, got mad, eventually got a rebound, tried to score himself, got fouled again, missed another. Like, instead of kicking the ball back out on one of those rebounds, he just decides to go for it. He ends up turning the ball over. Like, not great decision making by Rudy. ISO possessions by Randle and Edwards where they just never passed the ball. There were multiple of those, especially early in this game. The process was bad. Thankfully, Ant made enough shots, and later in the game, he got fouled a ton, which is fine. I think it was late third quarter, was the Rudy debacle I'm thinking of. And they had enough catch and shoot buckets that they made from outside the arc. I would say Naz Reid, Julius Randle was 4 or 5. I think he made his first 4 3-pointers. Like, those guys were awesome shooting the ball early. And that's how the Wolves built this lead, was they just made enough threes that it didn't matter that they had these other just stagnant possessions where they couldn't score with any real consistency or efficiency. So it was all about the 3-point shooting early for Minnesota. It's how they build the lead. And then also coupled with that, Memphis couldn't make shots. I don't think the defense was good at all in this game. And as evidenced by the 114 points and 49% shooting for Memphis and the 64 paint points. I don't think the Wolves played very good defense, period. There were some good individual possessions. We could pull up, Mike Conley had a couple of blocks. We could pull up some Jaden possessions that were really good. Like, there were some individual possessions that were very impressive. But early in the game, they were bailed out by Memphis just missing open shots. Like, weirdly enough, it was a 3-point variance in the Wolves' favor that led to the 9-point end of first quarter lead, 9-point halftime lead. Was just the Wolves made shots, Memphis didn't. Sometimes it really is that simple. Otherwise, I don't think Minnesota outplayed Memphis really at all. So it was 9 points at halftime. And then in the second half, Memphis started to make their threes. And that's when things got a little bit dicey. The game wore on, the defense for the Timberwolves actually got worse. I thought the perimeter defense was the primary concern, as is often the case with the Timberwolves defense. When they give up a lot of paint points, it's because they're not containing the ball. The point of attack is soft. Occasionally the gap help isn't good. That's also a problem, but it's very rarely the actual rim protection, because Rudy's phenomenal there. I do think Ty Jerome played a really good game and kind of had the ball on a string and pick and roll and would get Rudy in a bind, trying to drop, and it didn't really work. Jerome thankfully missed a bunch of threes in this game, but other than that, like, he had 20 points on 12 shots, got to the line some, 6 assists. He was really good, especially pick and roll, and kind of create Gigi Jackson to an extent as well. I thought those guys did a pretty good job at in pick and roll game, and the Timberwolves coverage was just soft. I think is the best way to put it. Not at all what we saw against OKC. Like, that was arguably the best defensive performance the Timberwolves have had this season against the Thunder on Thursday. That same defense did not show up. And that's where, like, if you look at the locker room quotes from after the game from Chris Finch, from Anthony Edwards and Naz Reid, they talked about Chris Finch getting into them at halftime and basically saying, look, you guys aren't playing hard enough. I mean, what was it? First half, I think, was when Naz Reid had the lackadaisical behind the back that just, like, rolled past Anthony Edwards and out of bounds. And, like, it was those types of plays that the Wolves approached this game with this casual sense of, well, we should win this thing by double figures. They got up double figures. That attitude continued. And thankfully, I think, at least in the case of this game, I don't know longer term, Memphis was undermanned enough and the Wolves were superior enough as a roster, as a team talent level, that they could not only withstand the Memphis run, but eventually push, the double-digit lead even further and ultimately win by 17. And that's what kind of papers over some of this, where it's like, all right, that was all right. We'll talk about the good things here in a second. Like, there was some good stuff, well-balanced offense, some great moments from Jaden and Naz, and Ant got to the line a bunch, and that's all really good. This was like a weird roller coaster in that it was right in the middle of those things. There was a lot of that same lackadaisical concern. The game never really felt in doubt. It wasn't like one of those where the Wolves got way up, it got closer, they lost the lead, and they pushed back and won, and it was kind of like, well, that was weird. This was just like a ho-hum, dog days, late January game where it's like, all right, they won this game. But some of those same concerns were still there. And I think the Naz Reid behind the back pass with no reason or in the backcourt, ball goes out of bounds. That's the perfect kind of microcosm of the attitude the Timberwolves have going into these games. And it's not, Naz played incredible. We're going to talk about Naz. I'm not calling Naz out like for being worse than anybody else. It was just that play, and Ant was part of it too. It was kind of the I don't know, the way to best encompass everything that went wrong in this game for the Wolves, because ultimately they won by 17. You just don't want to have Anthony Edwards playing 39 minutes in a game like this, a starless Memphis team, after you've played 4 and 5 nights, and you're still having to put forth effort in the fourth because you didn't put forth that effort in the second quarter to run good offense, to move without the ball, and then also defensively, even worse. The offense, though, got better as the game wore on. We'll talk a little bit about that, because I thought as many points as the Wolves scored in the first half, it was just because they made enough shots to bail themselves out. The actual flow and process of the offense, the sharing of the ball, was much better in the second half, even as the defense got worse. We'll talk about that next, and we'll close here today with individual studs and duds. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Prize Picks. The big game is almost here. There's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. This week, Prize Picks has a special max discount for the big game live in the app right now. Drake May just needs one passing yard for the max discount to win. That's it. Add another player to your lineup, and if your picks hit, you can cash in. If you haven't used it, Prize Picks is super simple to use. It takes no time to get started. The whole format is very clean. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6, anywhere from 2 up to 6 player projections. It makes watching games even more fun because every drive and every stat matters. The social feeds feature within the Prize Picks app is awesome. You can share lineups and even copy lineups from winners with one click. Plus, you can follow Prize Picks partners like us and tail or fade picks right from the feed. I know I will be on Prize Picks for Sunday. I use it a ton during the playoffs this year for football, and I will definitely be on there this coming Sunday. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. The NBA trade deadline is basically here. It's coming up this Thursday. We want to give you a free month of the new Everydayer Club to help you get ready. If you need a group chat to keep up with the chaos, join ours. The Everydayer Club gets you access to a group chat on Discord just for Wolves fans, plus national chats where you can hang out with fans from across the league. I've been very active in the Discord over the past 3 weeks or so. Lots of chatter this week with the deadline Thursday. We will definitely be in the Locked On Wolves chat on Discord. This is the perfect time to join to get in on the trade banter. Big trade happened this weekend. Medium-sized trade. The Keon Ellis deal between the Bulls and the Kings, and I'm blanking on who the third team was, but somebody else got in there too. We're going to talk about all the potential stuff in the Discord chat about what the Wolves may or may not do by Thursday's deadline. Plus, by being part of the Everydayer Club, you'll get ad-free versions of this show. If you sign up by the trade deadline on February 5th, you can use the code DEADLINE to get your first month free. Again, that's code DEADLINE by this Thursday. Tap the link in the show notes or visit lockedonwolves.supercast.com to learn more. All right. So we talked about the offense being bailed out by three-point shooting, the defense being bailed out by Memphis not shooting the ball well in the first half. As the game wore on, though, the offensive process improved for the Timberwolves. Even as the defense was bad and the perimeter contained was miserable, and Ty Jerome and Gigi Jackson were, I don't want to say carving up, because, I mean, the Wolves did enough to win this game, but were kind of having their way with the Timberwolves defense in the second half of this game. But on offense, the process was much better. There was a lot of driving and kicking. There was a little bit more movement away from the ball than we're used to seeing. As Ant was ISOing and Julius was ISOing, we saw a little bit more movement. Jaden was active off the ball, which I thought was very, very nice to see. I thought Randle was pretty active when he didn't have the ball in his hands, which you can't always say. So a lot of great catch and shoot opportunities. Like we saw Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels combine in this game to go 9 of 15 from 3, which is obviously a phenomenal percentage. But for those two to get up 15 3-point shots means you're doing something right process-wise on offense. And again, it helps a ton when you make your threes. The Wolves finished 49% outside the arc in this game, which is fantastic. But I think just as importantly, they shot 37 of them. That was really good. And also the guys who shot them too, right? Like, you only had, Conley, Clark, and Highland combined for 5 3-point shots. Like, obviously those guys have to shoot threes in order to make this thing move. But Ant was 1 of 6. And the rest of the team shot the ball so well from outside the arc that it worked out. Naz was 6 of 10. Randle was 4 of 5. Jaden was 3 of 5. DiVincenzo was 3 of 5. DiVincenzo just hasn't been squeezing the trigger as much or as effectively lately. He was in foul trouble, so he only played 18 minutes in this game, which, by the way, is another reason why the minutes from Naz Reid were that much more important. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But the driving kick game was strong for the Timberwolves on offense. And then also, in addition to that, we saw this, I think it was third quarter, especially when Anthony Edwards got downhill. The Wolves scored 39 points in the third quarter. And Ant went to the line, I don't know how many times in that quarter. He shot 16 free throws in the game. I bet 8, if not 10 of them, probably 10 of them were in the third quarter. Just got into the paint a ton, and he made 14 of his 16 free throws as he continues to shoot free throws better as the season wears on as well. His aggressiveness getting downhill in a game where the jumper just wasn't working as well. I mean, Ant was 1 of 6 outside the arc. He was 8 of 15 on twos, which isn't great. It's okay. He shot a lot of mid-range jumpers. Thankfully, he's been shooting that, mid-range really well this year, but he missed a couple layups. And again, thankfully, he started getting foul calls in the third quarter, and that was a huge thing for the Timberwolves offense. After he was so good on Thursday against OKC, for him to turn in this performance while not shooting the ball well from the perimeter, a rarity for him, was awesome to see him get 33 points while only making 1 3-pointer in this game. Completely flipping what we're used to seeing, him getting to the free throw line instead of just shooting a ton of threes. The Wolves had 24 free throw attempts. Nobody had more than 1 except for Rudy Gobert, who had 4, and Ant, who had 16. And otherwise, the Wolves had 24, which, by the way, is the exact same number of attempts the Grizzlies had in this game. So you want to boil it down really simply. I already kind of laid out what happened here, but the Wolves and Grizzlies each shot the exact same number of 3-pointers and free throws. Minnesota made 8 more threes on the same number of attempts, and they made 3 more free throws on the same number of attempts. So they were a plus 27 outside the arc and at the line, just in terms of making shots. So again, oversimplifying to the max here, but that is just simply, it's a more talented team. The Wolves roster getting 37 3-point looks up and 24 free throws is better than the Memphis roster. And that goes back to my point in the first segment. Ultimately, that's why the Wolves won this game. They're just a better team than Memphis. They didn't play that much better overall. Memphis played pretty well. They just didn't make enough shots. They didn't have enough horses. It was Ty Jerome and Gigi Jackson, a little bit of KCP, and Jalen Wells was okay. Like that's kind of it. It's a pretty light roster with a bunch of the guys out that are out. And I mentioned Jackson and Morant, but obviously Scottie Pippen Jr. has been out, and he's good. And they've got some other rotation like guys that are out. Cam Spencer does some good stuff for them. He was relatively quiet in this game, but it's it just comes down to the star power and ultimately the shot making from Minnesota. And it was really good to see that as the game wore on. Really quickly, let's do studs and duds. And then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what's next on the schedule for the Wolves, and also I guess what to look out for again in Wolves Grizzlies tonight. Studs, obviously Naz Reid has to be at the top of that list. 20 points on 14 shots. He was 6 of 10 outside the arc. He was only 1 of 4 on twos, 6 of 10 on threes, 9 boards. So 29 and 5 for Naz with only 1 turnover and 3 steals. I mean, 29, 5, and 3 with 1 turnover for Naz Reid in 31 minutes. Huge that he played as well as he did when Dante was in so much foul trouble. He also got a technical in this game. Dante shot the ball well, but was getting called for everything he wasn't getting called for on Thursday against OKC. And that's just the difference in game and officiating crews. And really a game like Thursday, the officials were like, all right, we're going to let some of this stuff go. It's 2 of the best teams in the league and the defending champs and national TV. And then Saturday, they were like, all right, Saturday in Memphis at the end of January, we'll let this thing, we're going to call a bunch of stuff. Just a different sort of vibe in this game in terms of the officiating and the physicality and what was allowed and not allowed. And so with DiVincenzo only playing 18 minutes because of the foul trouble, they needed the scoring off the bench from Naz Reid. He soaked up a lot of those minutes, and the Wolves just played bigger. And so Naz played 31 minutes, Gobert played 31 minutes, and Randle played 35 minutes. And all 3 of those guys had really good moments in this game. Also a stud, Julius Randle, 27, 7, and 7. He did have 4 turnovers. He was part of the ISO crew in the first half. It was mostly him and Ant that had problems with this. But 27 points on 17 shots and only 1 free throw attempt, too, by the way, from Julius Randle. But he was 4 or 5 outside the arc. 7 assists. He did have 4 turnovers, which was the most on the team. But this was a pretty good Randle game. We've seen some ups and downs lately from Julius, but I thought he was good in this game. My third stud, I go back and forth. We already did Naz and Randle. It's tough, actually, between Jaden and Ant. I kind of want to cheat and go with 4. I did mean to talk a little more about McDaniels. So I already talked about Ant. We'll go with Jaden. Technically, there's 4 studs in this game. I can't, all 4 of those guys played well. But Jaden McDaniels, 20 points on 8 of 14. It was 3 of 5 on threes. Made his only free throw attempt. 4 rebounds, 2 assists. I thought he was pretty good defensively. But I thought the offensive movement, the way he made himself available to shoot threes, the aggressiveness. 3 of 5 on threes, but he was also 5 of 9 on twos, which is a pretty good number of 2-point shots for Jaden McDaniels to get up. And I thought he was active off the ball, which was really nice to see. So I thought it was a good game for Jaden McDaniels as well. We talked about Ant. Duds, I don't know. I don't really have any. I know Conley didn't score in 18 minutes, but I actually thought he was pretty good defensively. Had a couple steals, had a couple blocks. He still obviously struggles against faster matchups, but he had some good moments in terms of recovery and stuff like that. I thought he was fine. Jalen was fine. Bones was maybe the quietest that we've seen him in a while. If I had to pick a dud, it's probably Bones Highland. In this game, he was a minus 11 in 13 minutes, and it was primarily the defense that wasn't very good. He only made 1 shot as well from the floor, but the defense was we'll call it shoddy defense from Bones Highland. By the way, Joan Beranger played 5 minutes, rotation minutes in the first half, so that was really nice to see as well. But no real duds outside of Bones for this game for Minnesota. I thought it was the problems were not isolated to 1 or 2 guys. It was just across the board. The perimeter defense was subpar. Across the board, the offensive process in the first half was subpar. They made enough shots in the first half to build a 9-point lead at halftime, and the offense got better as the game wore on. The defense never really improved, but they scored so much, 39 in the third quarter, 34 in the fourth quarter, that didn't ultimately matter. And credit to the Wolves for making shots, Naz, Jaden especially, and for Ant, and credit to Ant for getting downhill and getting to the line a bunch too. All right, let's close by talking about tonight's game, the standings, what's up next this week for the Wolves. It's all upcoming here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at Game Time. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple, and that's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans, and with the Wolves' upcoming schedule, it'll be good to see them get back home. And after this little bit of a road trip here, this time in Memphis, the Wolves are back home here soon. The next home game is Friday against the Pelicans. You can pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming game like Friday against the Pelicans, which is the start, by the way, of 4 games at home before the All-Star break. You get your tickets locked in within minutes. You can see your price all in up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, you can check the view from the seat before buying to help make your decision easy. Everything is quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, C-O, not .com. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is also brought to us by our friends at BetterHelp. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. February can be a lot. Flowers, candy, stuffed animals, and so much talk about relationships. It can honestly feel like everyone else has it all together when it comes to their love life. But here's the truth. Whether you're married, dating, single, or just focusing on you, most people are still figuring it out. And no matter where you are in your romantic journey, therapy can help you find your way. It can help you get clear on what you want, what feels heavy, and how to take some pressure off yourself. It's easy to assume that everyone has it going just fine, but look, therapy can help you recognize patterns that might be weighing relationships down. It might be able to help you communicate better, set healthier boundaries, and maybe just stop carrying everything by yourself. Even if you're not in a relationship right now, therapy can help you feel more confident in what you want moving forward. BetterHelp has licensed therapists in the U.S., and they do the initial matching work for you so you can focus on your goals. And if you want to switch therapists, you can do it at any time. Sign up and get 10% off at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, so the Wolves are back at it against Memphis tonight. They're doing the same thing that Golden State almost did in Minnesota last week when they played Saturday and what ended up being Sunday, Monday because of the postponement, but it was supposed to be Saturday, Monday, excuse me. That's what the Wolves are doing in Memphis. They get the Grizzlies tonight, exiting play on Saturday. So coming into play Sunday, and I'm recording this before all the Sunday games have finished, but coming out of play Saturday, Minnesota had leapfrogged the Lakers and Suns who did not play. Because the Wolves won, they're now alone in 5th place in the West. They're only a half game behind Houston. They're also only a half game above the Lakers and Suns. There's still 4 teams within 1 game of each other in the Western Conference. Houston in 4, Minnesota at 5, and then the Lakers and Suns. Also, they're only 2 games. The Wolves are only 2 games behind the Spurs, who lost the other day, and they are in the 3 seed. So the Wolves have 3 more losses and 1 less win than San Antonio. So that works out. The math would be 2 games behind them. So you look at the upcoming schedule, and again, recording this before some of the games that happen Sunday. Houston and Phoenix play, or excuse me, the Lakers play. They play the Knicks, so that's a tough game for them. Clippers and Suns should be a good game. There's not a Houston game. There is a Denver OKC game, though, after I record this on Sunday. So Denver OKC tonight, of course, at the top of the West. On the one hand, always great to see OKC lose, and you never know what happens. But if Denver loses, then the Wolves would only be 2 games behind Denver, who would be tied for the 2 spot in the West with the Spurs. So a lot to keep an eye on. There's a ton of shuffling to happen, obviously, over the next 10 weeks of the regular season as it closes out. The trade deadline this Thursday is, of course, massive. We're going to talk about that. Tomorrow's going to be the post-game pod from Monday night's game. But on Wednesday, we're going to talk all things trade deadline. Obviously, Thursday will be a post-game pod, but leading into the trade deadline, there's a lot of stuff to keep an eye on. A trade happening over the weekend, the Keon Ellis deal. So we'll keep an eye on, which is, of course, a player the Wolves reportedly had some interest in, even though I was a bit dubious about anything happening there. Something else to keep an eye on throughout this week. The Wolves' schedule, not bad. We talked about this the other day. They've won 4 straight. Just don't lose the plot in Memphis, and then you get a 5-game winning streak. And remember, they just had a streak where they'd won 6 out of 7 before they lost 5 in a row. Win your 5th in a row at Memphis, a game they definitely should win. At Toronto is not easy on Wednesday night, trade deadline eve, but then you come back home for 4 games prior to the All-Star break. All winnable games, all games they'll be favored in. The lowly Pelicans, the resurgent Clippers on Sunday afternoon. So obviously that is that Super Bowl Sunday. A weird matinee game, but obviously winnable. And then Atlanta and Portland to close out the unofficial first half of the season. They're going to be favored in all, 6 of these games between now and the All-Star break. If they can go to the All-Star break at a 10-game winning streak, we're all feeling pretty good at that point, right? Odds are they lose 1 or 2 of these along the way, but they really shouldn't lose more than 1. It's hard to beat a team twice in 3 days, but they should beat Memphis twice. At Toronto and home for the Clippers are the 2 where you could understand a loss, but they can't afford to lose the rest of them. They got to win them all, and it'd be great to win one of those 2. I think it's all on the table for the Timberwolves. And who knows what happens before the deadline Thursday. I've said all along, I do think they make a move. I don't think it's massive. And we'll talk more about this on Wednesday's show, provided nothing happens before then. I think we're talking like a Dillingham for an expiring veteran contract type of a move, right? I don't know that it'll be this, and he probably would require more, but Trey Jones or there's somebody else that I feel like I just saw. Like Lonzo Ball. I don't know what Lonzo Ball they're going to get for Lonzo Ball, Cleveland is, but he is now available, reportedly. There's moves like that are out there that could improve this team that I think make a lot of sense. And I do think the Wolves are trying to trade Rob Dillingham. I think that's likely that happens based on everything we've seen reported. The Wolves have some second-round picks. They have a future. They have a 2028 pick swap they can trade. I think they attach one of those things to like a Dillingham and potentially more if they have to trade a Mike Conley or something like that. They don't want to from a locker room standpoint, but they will if they have to. My hunch is it's not anything massive. I don't think it rises to the level of Conley and Dillingham and something else having to be traded, like some of those potential moves we talked about last week. So we'll talk more about that as the week wears on. Of course, in tonight's game against Memphis, presumably a lot of the same guys aren't going to play for the Grizzlies. Things to keep an eye out for, all the things they struggled with on Saturday, right? Do a better job defending the paint, defend the pick and roll better, maybe adjust the coverages with Ty Jerome on the floor because he is like a really good offensive player. And the Timberwolves need to do a better job of containing in the pick and roll and not putting so much pressure on the rim defense. That's something that just needs to get shored up. And you can't just rely, be more aggressive going downhill like Ant was in the second half of this game. You can't rely on shooting 49% on threes. Just like there needs to be a little bit better commitment to getting downhill and trying to score at the rim for the Wolves in this game. So all things to keep an eye on tonight for Wolves Grizzlies. Of course, we'll have the live postcast. Jack and Luke doing an awesome job as always tonight following Wolves Grizzlies. I will be back tomorrow with the postgame pod following the Timberwolves Grizzlies round 2 of this 3-day stretch in Memphis. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. A reminder that if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Wolves ad-free plus members-only Discord access and more. Discord access is huge this week with the deadline coming up on Thursday. Head to lockedonwolves.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, after this episode, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. If you're listening on audio, make sure that you make your second listen the NBA Game Night Show over at Locked On NBA. Of course, Locked On Wolves is part of the very same Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.